I'm Marcus, 29 years old, and until last summer I thought being financially successful meant my family would finally respect me. I spent $15,000 on a Hawaiian vacation for my parent sister and her new boyfriend. I planned every detail hoping to create perfect memories with the people I loved most. Instead, I discovered just how quickly they could replace me. Before I tell you how my own family tossed me aside like yesterday's trash, drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should value you most. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago shaped much of who I am today. Our family was never wealthy, but my parents, Harold and Diana, worked hard to give my younger sister Brianna and me a decent life. Dad was a high school math teacher, and Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family, but the dynamics under our roof were always a bit complicated. From an early age, I understood my role as the responsible older brother. While Brianna got to join dance classes and go to sleepovers, I was expected to maintain perfect grades, help around the house, and set the example. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister deeply. She had this infectious laugh and creative spirit that made her easy to love, but it was hard not to notice the different standards we were held to. Marcus is so mature for his age, my parents would tell relatives, which sounded like a compliment, but really meant I had to be the adult when my parents couldn't or wouldn't be. By the time I was 16, I was working part-time at a local grocery store while maintaining straight A's. Meanwhile, Brianna struggled with her grades but got endless support and understanding from our parents. She's just finding her way, Mom would say when Brianna brought home another C-. But when I got my first B+ in advanced calculus, Dad sat me down for a serious talk about living up to my potential. Despite this imbalance, I genuinely loved my family and wanted their approval. When Brianna decided to attend an expensive arts college to study graphic design, I had just landed my first software engineering job after graduating from a state university on scholarships. Without hesitation, I contributed $200 monthly toward her tuition for 4 years. It was a significant portion of my entry-level salary, but the pride in my parents' eyes made it feel worthwhile. That same year, Dad lost his job when budget cuts hit the school district, and Mom had to reduce her hours to care for Grandma who had a stroke. I stepped in again, sending home $500 monthly for nearly a year until they got back on their feet. They thanked me profusely, of course, but it was always with an undertone of expectation, as if my financial support was simply fulfilling my role as the responsible son. When I received an offer from a major tech company in Seattle at 25, I knew moving across the country would strain our relationship. Still, the opportunity was too good to pass up. My salary more than doubled, and for the first time I had financial freedom. Yet the geographic distance made me worry about losing my place in the family. To compensate, I became even more generous. I paid for flights home 5 times a year, sent thoughtful gifts for every occasion, and never missed our Sunday family video calls. I funded a new roof for my parents' house when a storm damaged it and paid off the remainder of Brianna's student loans as a graduation gift. Each time my family expressed gratitude, but it never seemed to change the fundamental dynamic. Brianna remained the emotional center of the family, while I was valued primarily for what I could provide. My personal life in Seattle was comfortable but somewhat lonely. I made a few good friends: Trevor from work, Scott from my apartment building, and Natalie from a coding meetup, but nothing compared to the deep connection I craved with my family. Dating was a series of short-lived relationships that fizzled out when women sensed my workaholic tendencies or my preoccupation with family obligations back home. My coworker Rachel once said something that stuck with me. "Marcus, you're trying to buy your family's love when what you really want can't be purchased." I dismissed her comment at the time, but it lingered in the back of my mind. When I turned 29 last January, I realized it had been years since our entire family had spent quality time together. That's when the idea of a Hawaiian vacation was born. I envisioned mornings on the beach, adventurous excursions, and long dinners filled with laughter and connection. This trip would be different from my usual financial contributions. It would be an experience, a chance to rebuild our bonds and create lasting memories. Little did I know that my generous gesture would reveal just how disposable I truly was in my family's eyes. The moment I decided to plan a family vacation to Hawaii, I threw myself into research with the same intensity I apply to complex coding projects. I spent weekends comparing resorts, reading hundreds of reviews, and creating spreadsheets of activities ranked by their ratings and proximity to our accommodation. This wasn't going to be just any vacation, it needed to be perfect. After narrowing down the options, I settled on a luxury resort on Maui's western shore. The property featured 3 infinity pools overlooking the ocean, 6 restaurants ranging from casual beachside dining to fine cuisine and spacious suites with private balconies. At $400 per night per room, it was extravagant, but I wanted to spare no expense. I booked 2 oceanfront suites, one for my parents and one for me for 10 days in June. When I called my parents to announce the trip, Mom actually squealed with delight. "Hawaii, oh Marcus, we've always wanted to go. Your father and I never thought we could afford it." Dad's reaction was more subdued but equally appreciative. "That's incredibly generous, son. We're looking forward to it." I immediately forwarded them the confirmation emails and a digital brochure of the resort. "Everything's taken care of," I assured them. "Flights, accommodation, even a food and activity allowance. All you need to do is pack your swimsuits and sunscreen." 2 days later, Brianna called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom told me about Hawaii. I can't believe it, Marcus. You're the best brother ever." Her enthusiasm warmed my heart. This was exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. Then came the request that would ultimately change everything. "So I've been seeing this amazing guy Jake for about 3 months now. Would it be okay if he joined us? You'll absolutely love him. He's so adventurous and fun." I hesitated. This trip was meant for family, and I hadn't budgeted for an additional person. More importantly, I wasn't sure about including someone I'd never met in what I hoped would be an intimate family reunion. But Brianna's pleading wore me down as it always did. "Please, Marcus. It would mean so much to me. Mom and Dad have already met him and think he's great. This would be the perfect chance for you to get to know him too." Unable to deny my sister something that clearly meant so much to her, I agreed. "Sure, Bri. If he's important to you, I'd love to meet him." I immediately contacted the resort to upgrade her room to a double and booked another flight ticket. The additional costs brought the total to $15,000, a substantial sum, even with my comfortable salary. As the departure date approached, my excitement grew. I shopped for new vacation clothes, downloaded Hawaiian travel guides, and even practiced a few basic phrases in Hawaiian. At work, I cleared my schedule, delegating ongoing projects and setting up automatic responses for my emails, something almost unheard of in my department. My boss looked concerned when I requested 2 full weeks off, but I assured him everything would be handled. "You deserve this break," Marcus Trevor told me as we grabbed coffee before my departure. "You work harder than anyone I know. Just promise me you'll actually relax and not spend the whole time on your laptop." The night before my flight, I meticulously packed my suitcase, including thoughtful gifts for everyone, a designer sundress for Mom, high-end golf accessories for Dad, and an expensive camera for Brianna, who had recently shown interest in photography. For Jake, I purchased a gift card to the resort spa, hoping to make a good first impression. When I arrived at Chicago O'Hare International Airport for our connecting flight to Maui, my family was already waiting at the gate. The sight of them, Mom waving enthusiastically, Dad standing tall with a rare smile, and Brianna bouncing on her toes filled me with joy. Then I noticed the tall, tanned man with his arm casually draped around my sister's shoulders. Jake. With his perfectly styled hair designer sunglasses and confident smile, Jake looked like he'd walked straight out of a men's fashion magazine. As introductions were made, I noticed how my parents beamed at him, already comfortable in his presence. "Great to finally meet you, man," Jake said, offering a firm handshake. "Brianna's told me so much about her successful big brother. Thanks for including me on this awesome trip. I've been to Hawaii 3 times, so I can show you all the best spots." Something about his tone felt slightly condescending, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was Brianna's boyfriend, and I was determined to like him for her sake. During the 6-hour flight from Chicago to Maui, I noticed the first subtle signs of what was to come. My parents, seated across the aisle from Jake and Brianna, kept leaning over to engage him in conversation. They laughed at his jokes, asked about his previous Hawaiian adventures, and seemed genuinely fascinated by his stories about his job in pharmaceutical sales. Meanwhile, when I tried to share details about the exciting activities I'd planned, my mother patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear. We'll look at the itinerary later." When we finally arrived at the resort, the breathtaking beauty of the property momentarily made me forget these small disappointments. The open-air lobby offered stunning ocean views, and staff greeted us with fresh flower leaves and cold tropical drinks. As we checked in, I felt a surge of pride seeing my family's awed expressions. This was exactly what I had worked so hard for. "Welcome to paradise," the receptionist said as she handed over our room keys. "Mr. Wilson has arranged everything for your stay." In that moment, watching my family marvel at the luxury surrounding them, I felt certain that the next 10 days would be everything I had dreamed of and more. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning after our arrival, I woke up refreshed, despite the time difference, excited to begin our first full day in paradise. I'd arranged a breakfast reservation at the resort's renowned oceanfront restaurant for 8:30 in the morning and had set my alarm for 7:45 to ensure I'd be ready on time. After a quick shower, I headed to my parents' suite to make sure they were awake. To my surprise, their door was already open and the room was empty. Thinking they might have gone for an early morning walk, I tried calling my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, I checked Brianna and Jake's room, also empty. Slightly confused, I made my way to the restaurant, assuming they might have gone ahead without me. Sure enough, I found my family already seated at a prime table overlooking the ocean, plates filled with tropical fruits and Hawaiian specialties. 4 empty coffee cups suggested they'd been there for some time. "There you are," Mom said when she spotted me. "We didn't want to wake you. You seemed so tired from organizing everything." "We've been up since 6, Dad added proudly. Jake suggested we catch the sunrise on the beach. It was spectacular. Jake nodded, his mouth full of pineapple. "Nothing like a Hawaiian sunrise, bro. You missed out." I forced a smile and took the remaining seat, trying to ignore the sting of being left out of the first morning activity. The breakfast reservation was for 8:30, I mentioned lightly. I was up in time. "Oh, we were starving after the beach," Brianna explained, not picking up on my disappointment. "Jake said, 'This place starts serving at 7, so we just came early.'" I nodded and ordered coffee, reminding myself not to overreact. It was just breakfast after all. The day's main event was still to come. A snorkeling excursion I'd booked months in advance at Molokini, a crescent-shaped volcanic crater that housed hundreds of species of tropical fish. As we boarded the catamaran for our snorkeling trip, my spirits lifted. The day was perfect: clear blue skies, gentle breeze, and water, so turquoise it seemed unreal. I'd chosen this particular tour because it included certified marine biologists as guides and a gourmet lunch on board. While we sailed to the snorkeling site, Jake dominated the conversation, regaling my family with tales of his previous adventures. "Last time I was in Hawaii, I swam with sharks off the North Shore," he proclaimed. "No cage, just me, and a 12-foot tiger shark eye to eye." Having researched extensively about Hawaiian marine life, I knew that tiger sharks rarely came close to shore, and that such encounters would be extremely dangerous without proper safety measures. But my family hung on Jake's every word, gasping and asking for more details. When I tried to share some fascinating facts about Molokini's formation and ecosystem that I'd learned during my research, Dad cut me off mid-sentence. Jake was telling us about the time he helped rescue a tourist who got caught in a rip current, he said, turning back to my sister's boyfriend expectantly. During the actual snorkeling, I found myself alone most of the time. Mom and Dad paired up while Brianna and Jake swam together, pointing out colorful fish and coral formations to each other. The marine biologist guide noticed me by myself and kindly showed me a sea turtle resting among the coral, which briefly lifted my spirits. That evening, I'd made reservations at the resort's most exclusive restaurant for a sunset dinner. I'd specifically requested a round table with an unobstructed ocean view to celebrate our first full day in Hawaii. When we arrived, however, the hostess led us to a rectangular table instead. Before I could speak to her about the change, Jake stepped forward. "Excuse me, we'd prefer that table by the window," he said, pointing to a better-positioned table that had just been vacated. To my surprise, the hostess immediately accommodated his request with a friendly smile. Of course, sir. Right this way. When we were seated, I found myself at the far end of the rectangular table with Jake positioned at the head, my parents on either side of him, and Brianna next to Mom. From my position, I could barely see the sunset I had specifically arranged for us to enjoy together. Throughout dinner, I made multiple attempts to join the conversation, sharing interesting facts about traditional Hawaiian cuisine or asking questions about tomorrow's plans. Each time, I found myself either interrupted or acknowledged with brief responses before attention returned to Jake's stories. "You should have seen the waves in Tahiti," Jake was saying, gesturing dramatically. "Makes Hawaiian surf look like a kiddie pool." "Have you really been to Tahiti?" I asked, genuinely curious but also slightly skeptical given some of his more outlandish claims. A flash of something annoyance perhaps crossed his face before he smiled. "Twice, bro. I backpacked through the South Pacific after college, stayed in these tiny villages where tourists never go." "That's amazing," Mom gushed. "You're so adventurous, Jake. You must have a million stories." "Not like Marcus," Dad added with a chuckle. "Always planning and researching. Probably knows more about Hawaii from Google than most locals know from living here." The table laughed, and though I knew Dad hadn't meant it maliciously, the comment stung. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment alone to compose myself. When I returned, they were discussing tomorrow's plans, completely disregarding the private boat tour I had booked and already mentioned several times. "Jake knows this amazing hidden waterfall," Brianna was saying excitedly. "It's not in any guidebooks. We could hike there tomorrow." "That sounds wonderful," Mom agreed. "Is it difficult to get to?" "Moderate hike, about 3 miles each way through some gorgeous rainforest," Jake explained. "Totally worth it, though. The pool under the waterfall is like something from a movie." "I actually booked us a private boat tour tomorrow," I interjected. "It includes snorkeling at a secluded reef and lunch prepared by a private chef. It wasn't easy to get reservations. They're usually booked months in advance." There was a moment of awkward silence before Dad spoke. "That sounds nice too, son. Maybe we could do Jake's hike in the morning and your boat thing in the afternoon." "The boat tour is all day," I explained, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "It leaves at 9 in the morning and returns around 4. "Oh," Brianna said, disappointment evident in her tone. "But Jake's waterfall sounds really special." "And we can do it any time," Jake added smoothly. "Your boat tour is probably awesome too, Marcus. Maybe we can hit the waterfall another day." Though his words were conciliatory, his tone suggested he was merely humoring me. Nevertheless, I felt a small victory in maintaining our original plans. After dinner, while my family decided to check out the resort's luau performance, I excused myself to confirm details for tomorrow's boat tour. In reality, I needed some time alone to process the day's events and shake off the growing feeling of being an outsider in my own family vacation. Walking along the beach alone, I called Trevor back in Seattle, needing a friendly voice. "How's paradise?" he asked cheerfully. "Beautiful," I replied honestly. "The resort is everything I hoped for. It's just what? Don't tell me you're working remotely." "No, nothing like that. It's my sister's boyfriend. Everyone seems completely enamored with him, and I'm starting to feel, I don't know, redundant. On a trip you organized and paid for, that's messed up, man." "Maybe I'm overreacting," I said, watching the moonlight shimmer on the gentle waves. "It's only been 1 day. Trust your gut, Marcus. You're the most level-headed person I know. If something feels off, it probably is." When I returned to the resort, I found my family at the outdoor bar laughing hysterically at something Jake had said. When I approached, Brianna waved me over. "Marcus, Jake was just telling us about the time he accidentally walked into a women's changing room in Japan. It's hilarious." I smiled politely and joined them, determined to integrate myself into the group. "So everyone ready for the boat tour tomorrow?" I asked during a lull in conversation. "We need to be at the marina by 8:45. About that, Brianna began exchanging glances with Jake. We were thinking. My heart sank as I realized what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up early, excited, despite my reservations from the previous day. The private boat tour I'd arranged was the excursion I was most looking forward to, a custom experience aboard a luxury catamaran with just our family and the crew. I'd specifically requested a marine biologist guide, who specialized in Hawaiian ecology and had arranged for a gourmet lunch featuring local ingredients prepared by a chef from one of Maui's top restaurants. The total cost for this single-day excursion was $2,000, but I believed it would be the highlight of our trip. After getting dressed, I headed to my parents' suite to make sure everyone was ready to leave for the marina. When I knocked on their door, there was no answer. Thinking they might already be at breakfast, I tried calling both their phones but received no response. Growing concerned, I went to Brianna and Jake's room next, knocking with increasing urgency. Again, silence. With a feeling of dread building in my stomach, I went to the front desk. "Excuse me, I'm trying to locate my family, the Wilsons, in suites 324 and 326. Have you seen them this morning?" The receptionist checked her computer. "I believe they left the resort quite early, sir. Around 6 a.m. Left. Did they say where they were going?" "I'm sorry, I don't have that information." Returning to my parents' suite, I used the spare key card I had for emergencies. The room was empty, beds already made by housekeeping. On the desk, I found a hastily scribbled note in my mother's handwriting. "Marcus Jake knows a secret trail to an amazing waterfall. We decided to go hiking with him early to beat the heat. Should be back by afternoon. Don't worry about us, Mom." I stared at the note in disbelief. They had knowingly abandoned our plans for the boat tour, an expensive, prepaid excursion I had organized months in advance, without even the courtesy of telling me to my face. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had chosen Jake's spontaneous suggestion over my carefully planned activity, without a second thought for my feelings or the money wasted. With shaking hands, I called the tour company to explain the situation, hoping to reschedule for another day during our stay. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, but we're fully booked for the remainder of the week," the booking agent informed me. "And as per our policy, cancellations within 24 hours are non-refundable. I would have to forfeit the entire $2,000. Under normal circumstances, the money wouldn't have bothered me as much as the principle of the matter, but combined with the blatant disregard for my efforts, it felt like salt in an open wound. For the next few hours, I sat alone on my balcony, alternating between calling my family's phones, all went straight to voicemail, and staring at the ocean. Around 11 in the morning, I received a text from Brianna. "Waterfall is amazing. You should have come back later." No apology. No acknowledgement of the boat tour they had skipped. Just rubbing in what a great time they were having without me. By the time my family finally returned to the resort at 4:30 in the afternoon, I had been sitting alone in the lobby for hours, my mood vacillating between hurt anger and a deep sense of betrayal. They burst through the entrance, laughing, sunburned, and animated, looking like a perfect family unit minus me. Mom spotted me first. "Marcus, there you are. You would not believe the day we had. The waterfall was absolutely magical." "Dude, you missed out," Jake added, clapping me on the shoulder as if we were old friends. "Purest water you've ever seen, and we had the whole place to ourselves." "I tried calling all of you multiple times," I said, quietly struggling to keep my voice steady. "We had the boat tour today, the one I told everyone about, the one I paid $2,000 for." A brief flash of guilt crossed my father's face. "Ah, right. The boat thing. Well, cell reception isn't great in the jungle. We figured you'd understand." "Understand what?" "That you all decided to ditch me, and the plans we agreed on." "Don't be so dramatic," Marcus. Brianna sighed. "It's not like we ditched you. You could have come with us if you weren't so rigid about following your precious itinerary." "How could I come with you when I woke up to an empty resort and a note you all left before 6 in the morning without telling me?" Mom patted my arm condescendingly. "We didn't want to wake you, dear. You worked so hard organizing everything. We thought you might enjoy a morning to sleep in." The casual dismissal of my feelings was infuriating, but I took a deep breath, determined not to make a scene in the resort lobby. "I need to shower before dinner," I said stiffly, turning toward the elevators. Speaking of dinner, Jake called after me. "I found this awesome seafood shack on the other side of the island. Super authentic, locals only. I made us reservations for 7. I stopped and turned slowly. I already made reservations at the resort's Japanese restaurant. I mentioned it yesterday. "Cancel them," Dad suggested with a shrug. "Jake says this place has the best poke on the island. We can try your restaurant another night." Looking at their expectant faces, I realized none of them saw anything wrong with their behavior. In their minds, Jake's spontaneous suggestions trumped my careful planning every time, regardless of the cost, financial or emotional to me. "Fine," I conceded, too drained to argue. "7 it is." That evening, as we drove to the local seafood shack, which turned out to be a touristy restaurant with inflated prices and mediocre food, I sat silently in the back seat while Jake regaled my family with embellished tales of his waterfall adventure. The rocks were super slippery, but I helped Diana across like it was nothing, he boasted, referring to my mother by her first name with a familiarity that grated on my nerves. "He was so careful with me," Mom added adoringly. "I felt completely safe." And when that other hiking group showed up, Dad continued, "Jake knew exactly how to find another viewpoint away from the crowds. The kid has a sixth sense for this stuff." "It's just experience," Jake said with false modesty. "When you've traveled as much as I have, you develop instincts." Throughout dinner, the pattern continued. Every conversation circled back to Jake's apparent expertise on everything from Hawaiian culture to the best local beers. When I attempted to share an interesting fact about traditional fishing practices I'd learned during my research, Jake interrupted with, "Actually, that's not quite right. My buddy who lives here says." After the main course, while waiting for dessert, Jake raised his beer in a toast. "To tomorrow's adventure surfing lessons at Makina Beach, I know the instructor. He'll give us the local treatment." I set down my fork carefully. "I haven't booked any surfing lessons." "No worries, bro. I took care of it this afternoon. Called in a favor from my friend." "And when were you planning to tell me about this change to our schedule?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Jake looked surprised by my question. "Just did, didn't I? Thought you'd be happy not having to organize everything for once." "Marcus has been working so hard planning this trip," Brianna added, as if she were defending me rather than dismissing my concerns. "It's nice for him to relax and let someone else take charge for a change." "Jake's spontaneity is refreshing," Mom said, patting my hand as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Your planning is wonderful, dear, but sometimes the best experiences are the unplanned ones." "That's right," Dad agreed. "You could learn to live a little from Jake. Not everything needs spreadsheets and advance bookings." Their words cut deep, revealing what they really thought of my efforts. To them, my meticulous planning, my way of showing love and care, was a character flaw rather than a strength. And Jake's haphazard last-minute suggestions were somehow superior despite the fact that I was financing this entire vacation. Later that night, as I lay awake in my luxurious suite that suddenly felt cold and empty, I received a text from my mother. "Don't forget, surfing tomorrow, Jake says to meet in the lobby at 8. Wear sunscreen." Curiosity and suspicion prompted me to check my resort account on my phone. What I discovered sent a wave of fresh anger through me. Jake had been using my room number to charge activities and drinks to my account. Somehow my family had given him access to the prepaid activities fund I had established for us, treating him to helicopter tours, premium cocktails, and spa treatments, using the money I had set aside for our family experiences. The betrayal was complete. Not only had they sidelined me emotionally on a trip I had funded, but they were literally using my money to finance Jake's vacation and treat him like an honored guest while I sat alone on the sidelines. As I stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of waves crashing on the shore, I came to a painful realization. I had always been an outsider in my own family, valued not for who I was, but for what I could provide. And now that Jake offered excitement and novelty, they didn't even need me for the vacation I was paying for. Something broke inside me that night, the illusion that I could purchase my family's love and respect through generosity and sacrifice. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with hurt, anger, and painful clarity. As the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I would stop trying to buy my family's approval. I would walk away from this farce of a family vacation and reclaim my self-respect. Instead of joining the surfing excursion Jake had arranged, I took a long walk on the beach at sunrise, feeling the warm sand between my toes and the gentle Hawaiian breeze against my face. For the first time since arriving in paradise, I actually noticed the beauty surrounding me rather than focusing on my family's approval. Finding a quiet spot where the beach curved around a small cove, I sat down and called Trevor, needing the perspective of someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. They did what Trevor exclaimed after I explained the situation. Let me get this straight. You spent $15,000 on this vacation, and they're ignoring you to hang out with your sister's boyfriend of 3 months, and they gave him access to charge things to your account. That's beyond disrespectful. Marcus, that's exploitation. I know, I sighed, watching a group of early morning paddle boarders glide across the calm water. I've always known deep down that my relationship with my family was conditional, but this trip has made it impossible to ignore. So what are you going to do? I'm done, I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. I'm not going to spend another week being the invisible financier of their vacation with Jake. I'm going to move to a different resort and enjoy Hawaii on my own terms. Good for you, man. It's about time you stood up for yourself. After ending the call, I spent an hour researching other accommodations on the island. I found a smaller boutique hotel about 20 minutes away that had a room available for the remainder of my stay. It was less luxurious than our current resort, but had excellent reviews for its authentic atmosphere and friendly staff. I booked it immediately, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Back at the resort, I packed my belongings efficiently, leaving out only what I would need for the day. Then I headed to the front desk to make arrangements for the transition. I'd like to keep my current suite paid through the end of our original booking, I explained to the manager. My family will continue to stay here, but I'll be moving to different accommodations today. Is there a problem with your room, Mr. Wilson? The manager asked, concerned. No, the resort is wonderful. This is a personal decision. After modifying the reservation and settling the details, I returned to my room to finish packing. As I was zipping my suitcase, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Brianna still in her swimwear, looking confused and slightly annoyed. Where were you this morning? We waited in the lobby for 20 minutes before heading to the beach without you. I decided not to join the surfing lesson, I replied calmly, continuing to pack. Her eyes widened as she noticed my open suitcase. What are you doing? Are you packing? Yes, I'm moving to a different hotel. What? Why would you do that? Is this because we went to the waterfall yesterday? Are you seriously that petty? Her immediate assumption that I was being childish rather than considering that my feelings might be legitimately hurt only confirmed I was making the right decision. This isn't about the waterfall, Brianna. It's about the fact that since we arrived, I've been treated like an afterthought on a vacation that I planned and paid for. You've all made it clear that you prefer Jake's company and his spontaneous ideas to spending time with me or following through on plans we agreed to. That's ridiculous, she protested, though her eyes darted away guiltily. We love having you with us. You're just being too sensitive. Am I? You left without me yesterday for an excursion Jake suggested, causing me to forfeit $2,000 on a boat tour you all knew about. Dad told me I should learn to live a little from Jake, and somehow Jake has been charging expenses to my room despite not being authorized on my account. Brianna's cheeks flushed. Mom gave him the room number for emergencies. He probably just got confused. 7 separate charges in 2 days isn't a confusion, Brianna. It's taking advantage. So this is about money. I thought you wanted us to enjoy ourselves. You're always saying how you have more than enough. Her response was so disconnected from the real issue that I almost laughed. This has never been about money. It's about respect. It's about being treated like a person with feelings rather than an ATM with legs. You're ruining this vacation, she accused, tears welling in her eyes. Jake was so excited about all the plans he made for us this week. Plans? He made using my money, you mean? On a trip I organized and paid for. You're being so selfish right now, she snapped, wiping away tears. I took a deep breath, refusing to be manipulated by her emotional reaction. I've paid for your suite through the end of our original booking. You, Mom, Dad, and Jake can continue enjoying the resort. I'll be staying elsewhere. You can't be serious. I am. And one more thing. I've canceled the remaining prepaid activities except for your accommodation. If Jake wants to plan excursions, he can pay for them himself. Her mouth fell open in shock. You can't do that. Actually, I can. They were booked under my name with my credit card. Just then, my parents appeared in the doorway behind Brianna, clearly having returned from the beach to find out why we hadn't joined them. "What's going on?" Mom asked, looking between us with concern. "Brianna, why are you crying?" "Marcus is leaving," she blurted out. "He's moving to another hotel and canceled all our activities because he's jealous of Jake." Dad's expression hardened. "Is this true, Marcus?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm moving to another hotel, yes. And I've canceled the prepaid activities I arranged except for your rooms, which are covered until the end of our stay." "But why?" "Because of one missed boat tour," Mom asked incredulously. "Because I'm tired of being taken for granted," I replied honestly. "I came here hoping to reconnect with my family, but instead I've been repeatedly pushed aside in favor of someone you've known for 3 months. I've tried to be understanding, but when Dad suggested I should learn to live from Jake while using my money to fund his ideas, I realized this isn't a healthy dynamic for any of us." "We didn't mean to make you feel left out," Mom insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. "Jake just has so much energy and great ideas. Ideas that cost me money when you skipped the activities I've already paid for," I pointed out. "Ideas that exclude me from family experiences. Ideas that none of you bothered to consult me about, despite the fact that I organized this entire vacation." "You're overreacting," Dad said dismissively. "Family vacations always have some friction. There's no need to storm off like this." "I'm not storming off. I'm making a conscious decision to remove myself from a situation that's making me unhappy. I've paid for your accommodations through the end of the week as planned. You're welcome to continue enjoying the resort." "And what about all the activities we had planned?" Mom asked. "The luau tomorrow night. The helicopter tour Jake arranged." "The helicopter tour Jake charged to my account, you mean? Those have been canceled. You're free to rebook them yourselves." Dad's face reddened with anger. "This is incredibly immature, Marcus. We raised you better than this." The irony of his statement was not lost on me. "You raised me to be responsible and consider others. I'm not seeing much of that consideration being extended to me right now. After everything you've done for us." Mom began, her voice trembling. "How could you ruin this family vacation?" "That's exactly it," I said quietly. "After everything I've done, not just this vacation, but years of financial support and constant effort to maintain our relationship, I still don't feel like a valued member of this family. I'm just the checkbook." I finished packing in silence while they watched, a mixture of anger, confusion, and dawning realization on their faces. Before leaving, I placed a note on the desk detailing exactly what remained covered and what had been canceled. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay," I said sincerely. "I need some time to think about our relationship moving forward." As I walked out the door with my suitcase, Brianna called after me. "So that's it? You're just abandoning us?" I turned back one last time. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm setting a boundary. There's a difference." Checking into my new hotel 30 minutes later felt like shedding a heavy backpack after a long hike. The boutique property was charming, with Polynesian-inspired decor and a small but pristine pool overlooking a secluded beach. My room was simple but comfortable, with a private lanai surrounded by flowering plumeria trees. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from my family. Most were guilt-laden messages from my mother. "I can't believe you would do this to us." And angry accusations from Brianna. "Jake says you're just jealous of him." My father left a voicemail that started with criticism, but ended with a grudging acknowledgement. "Maybe we did take your generosity for granted, but this isn't the way to handle it." I also received a message from my Aunt Elaine, who was apparently getting real-time updates from my mother. Diana called me in tears. "What's happening in Hawaii?" she says. "You abandoned them at the resort." Rather than engaging with the emotional manipulation, I turned off my phone and headed to the hotel's open-air bar. Sitting on a stool made from a carved coconut trunk, I ordered a Mai Tai and finally allowed myself to relax. The bartender, a friendly local woman named Leilani, noticed my pensive mood. "First time in Hawaii?" she asked as she garnished my drink with fresh pineapple. "Yes," I replied with a small smile, though not quite the vacation I expected. "The best experiences often aren't what we expect," she said wisely. Sometimes you have to let go of your plans to find what you really need. As the sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I sipped my drink and felt truly at peace for the first time since arriving in Hawaii. A group of locals and tourists had gathered at a nearby table, and their laughter drifted over on the warm evening breeze. One woman in particular caught my eye. She had curly brown hair and was animatedly describing something to her friends, her hands painting pictures in the air. When she glanced my way and smiled, I raised my glass in a small toast to new beginnings, free from the weight of unrealistic expectations and unbalanced relationships. She waved me over to join their table, and for once I decided to embrace spontaneity. "I'm Amelia," she said, extending her hand as I approached. "We're celebrating my first year working as a marine biologist here on the island. Want to join us?" "I'd love to," I replied, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face. "I'm Marcus, and I'm celebrating my first day of real freedom." The morning after moving to my new hotel, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. Without the pressure of managing my family's expectations or constantly seeking their approval, I was free to experience Hawaii on my own terms. I started my day with a simple breakfast at a local cafe recommended by the hotel staff. Fresh fruit, traditional loco moco, and Kona coffee served on a patio overlooking the ocean. With no rigid itinerary to follow, I decided to join a group snorkeling tour departing from a nearby beach. Unlike the exclusive private tour I had originally booked for my family, this was a small operation run by a native Hawaiian couple who had been taking visitors to their favorite spots for over 20 years. "First time in Maui?" asked the guide Keone as he helped me adjust my mask. "Yes, and I'm finally getting to enjoy it," I replied honestly. The group consisted of 8 tourists from various places: a retired couple from Minnesota, a father and teenage son from Australia, 2 college friends from California, and Amelia, the marine biologist I had met the previous evening. "Marcus, I didn't expect to see you here," she said with a warm smile. "I thought you might be nursing a hangover after all those Mai Tais last night." I laughed, feeling my cheeks warm slightly. I paced myself. Besides, I didn't want to waste a beautiful day in paradise. During the 3-hour tour, Keone and his wife Nalani shared their deep knowledge of the reef ecosystem and Hawaiian cultural connections to the ocean. They showed us hidden underwater caves and introduced us to resident sea turtles they had named. Swimming alongside these gentle creatures while sunlight filtered through the crystal-clear water was magical, a far cry from the performative vacation experiences I had originally planned. Throughout the excursion, Amelia shared fascinating additional details about the marine life. We encountered her passion for ocean conservation, evident in every word. By the time we returned to shore, I had made genuine connections with several people in the group, exchanging contact information and recommendations for local experiences. "A bunch of us are going to try a surfing lesson tomorrow morning," with Keone's brother Amelia mentioned as we helped pull the boat onto the beach. "You should join us." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised by how easy it felt to accept a spontaneous invitation without overthinking it. As I was walking back to my hotel, my phone buzzed with notifications. I had turned it back on that morning but had been too engaged in the snorkeling trip to check it. There were multiple missed calls and text messages from my family, their tone evolving from angry to desperate as they realized the implications of my departure. From Mom: "The resort says we can't confirm our helicopter tour because the original booking was canceled. Please call them and fix this." From Brianna: "Jake tried to arrange a sunset cruise, but they want a $500 deposit. Can you call them and put it on your card? We'll pay you back." From Dad's son: "We need to talk about this situation. The activities desk says all our excursions have been removed from their system." The most revealing message came from my Aunt Elaine, who had always been more perceptive than my parents. "Just spoke to your mother again. Sounds like they're experiencing the natural consequences of taking advantage of your generosity. Jake apparently isn't so charming now that he can't spend your money freely. Call me when you can." Rather than responding immediately, I decided to enjoy a late lunch at a small restaurant Keone had recommended, where I savored freshly caught mahi-mahi while watching surfers ride the afternoon waves. For the first time, in as long as I could remember, I was making choices based solely on my own preferences, without calculating how they would be received by others. That evening, I received a call from Natalie, another friend from Seattle who had heard about the situation from Trevor. "I always thought your family took advantage of you," she said bluntly, after I gave her the abbreviated version of events. "Remember when your sister expected you to fly home for that weekend art show of hers and got upset when you couldn't drop everything at a moment's notice?" "I do," I admitted. "I ended up sending her an expensive gift to make up for not being there, even though she only gave me 3 days' notice. And now you're finally setting boundaries. I'm proud of you, Marcus. How does it feel?" "Terrifying," I laughed. "But also right. I keep expecting to feel guilty, but mostly I just feel free." Later that night, I met Amelia and some of her friends for dinner at a local restaurant hidden away from the tourist areas. The small, open-air establishment served traditional Hawaiian dishes with a modern twist, and we sat at long communal tables sharing food and stories as if we'd known each other for years. "So, what brought you to Hawaii alone?" Amelia asked as we shared a dessert of haupia pudding with fresh mango. I gave her the condensed version of my family situation, expecting sympathy or awkwardness. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "My older brother was the family ATM for years," she said, "always trying to buy our parents' approval with expensive gifts and bailing everyone out of financial problems. It took a heart attack scare at 34 for him to realize no amount of money could make them treat him with respect. Is he okay now?" "Better than okay. Once he stopped trying to please everyone, he figured out what actually made him happy. Now he runs a small dive shop in Florida, has a great partner, and only deals with family on his own terms." Her story gave me hope that I wasn't overreacting, that setting boundaries was both necessary and potentially life-changing. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Elaine. "Your mother called me crying again," she began without preamble. "But this time it wasn't about you abandoning them. It was about Jake." "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Apparently, when Jake realized all the prepaid activities were canceled, he threw quite a tantrum, started complaining about false advertising, and how he was promised a luxury vacation. When your father suggested they could pay for some activities themselves, Jake made a comment about not wasting his money on overpriced tourist traps, and said he would have never come if he'd known he'd have to pay for anything." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. "How did Brianna take that?" "Not well. According to your mother, they had a huge fight last night. Brianna defended Jake at first, but then he made some comment about how her rich brother should have covered everything if he really cared about family. That's when she finally saw what you've been dealing with. And Mom and Dad. They're embarrassed. Your father tried to book that helicopter tour Jake had been talking up only to discover it costs $1,200 per person. He told your mother he had no idea how expensive these activities were, and gained a new appreciation for how much you'd invested in this trip. While I felt validated by their realization, I took no joy in their discomfort. I never wanted to ruin their vacation, I said honestly. I just couldn't keep being the invisible sponsor. They ruined it themselves, Marcus. And maybe this wake-up call is exactly what they needed. After ending the call with my aunt, I joined Amelia and the others for the surfing lesson we had planned. Despite numerous wipeouts and swallowing more seawater than I care to admit, it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life. The pure joy of finally catching a wave and riding it to shore, even for just a few seconds, was worth every failed attempt. That afternoon, I received a text from my father that surprised me with its humility. "We underestimated what you put into this trip, both financially and emotionally. Your mother and I would like to talk when you're ready. No pressure." Later, Amelia invited me to join her for a sunset hike to a viewpoint she frequented. As we climbed the moderate trail, she shared stories about her work protecting coral reefs and the local community efforts to preserve Hawaiian culture and ecosystems. At the summit, watching the sun sink into the Pacific in a blaze of gold and crimson, I realized I was genuinely happy for the first time in recent memory. Not the conditional happiness that came from momentary family approval, but a deeper contentment born of authentic connection and self-respect. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Amelia said softly, her curls dancing in the gentle breeze. "Perfect," I agreed, and I wasn't just talking about the sunset. That evening, over dinner, I received a series of increasingly humble texts from Brianna. "Jake and I broke up. He showed his true colors when the free luxury stuff disappeared. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was so caught up in trying to impress Jake that I didn't see how disrespectful we were being. Can we talk tomorrow, please?" The vindication I felt was tempered by genuine compassion for my sister. Despite everything, I didn't want her to be hurt. I replied simply, "I'm free for breakfast at 9. The cafe at my hotel makes amazing macadamia nut pancakes." As I fell asleep that night in my modest but comfortable room with the sound of distant waves providing a soothing backdrop, I reflected on how dramatically my vacation had transformed. What began as an expensive attempt to buy family connection had become a priceless lesson in self-worth and authentic joy. For the first time, I was experiencing Hawaii not as a costly backdrop for family approval, but as a beautiful place where I was learning to be true to myself. And I had a feeling the real transformation was just beginning. On my 7th day in Hawaii, I sat at a beachfront table at my hotel's cafe, watching the morning sun sparkle on the waves while waiting for Brianna. I had mixed feelings about the upcoming conversation. Part of me wanted to maintain the peaceful independence I'd discovered, while another part hoped for genuine reconciliation with my family. When Brianna arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, slightly entitled younger sister I'd known. She looked smaller somehow, her usual perfect appearance replaced by a simple sundress, minimal makeup, and slightly reddened eyes suggesting recent tears. "Marcus," she said hesitantly, hovering by the table, "thank you for agreeing to meet me." I stood, and after a moment's hesitation gave her a brief hug. "The pancakes here really are worth trying," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. After ordering, we sat in awkward silence, until Brianna finally spoke. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted, fidgeting with her napkin. "I was horrible to you." "You were caught up in Jake's influence," I offered, surprising myself with my generosity. She shook her head firmly. "That's no excuse. Jake may have been the catalyst, but the way I treated you, the way we all treated you, has been a pattern for years. We've taken your generosity for granted and made you feel like an outsider in your own family. I see that clearly now." Her self-awareness caught me off guard. "What happened with Jake?" I asked gently. "After you left, and all the prepaid activities disappeared, he completely changed. Started complaining about everything. The resort was too commercialized. The restaurants were tourist traps. Nothing lived up to his authentic travel experiences." She made air quotes around the word authentic with a bitter smile. "The final straw came when Dad suggested we could pay for some activities ourselves. Jake actually laughed and said he wouldn't waste his money on overpriced excursions. Then he looked at me and said, 'I thought your brother was loaded and covering everything. If I'd known this was a pay-your-own-way trip, I would have suggested Cancun instead, way cheaper for the same beaches.'" Ouch, I winced. "Yeah, in that moment I saw exactly what you'd been seeing all along. He was using me to access a luxury vacation on someone else's dime. All his amazing stories and adventurous ideas were just talk. When it came to actually investing in experiences, he wasn't willing to spend a dollar." Our food arrived momentarily, pausing the conversation. After a few bites, Brianna continued. "We had a huge fight after that. I defended you, and he accused me of choosing my ATM brother over him. That's when I told him to pack his bags. He's flying back to Chicago today." "I'm sorry it ended that way," I said sincerely. "Despite everything, I know you cared about him." "I thought I did," she acknowledged. "But I think I was more in love with the exciting, spontaneous image he projected than the actual person. Real Jake turned out to be selfish and entitled, not so different from how I've been acting honestly." Her self-reflection impressed me. That's a lot of personal insight to gain in just a few days. "Mom and Dad have been doing some soul-searching too," she added. "Dad actually calculated how much this trip must have cost you. When he realized the total, he was shocked. He had no idea you'd invested so much, not just money, but time and thought into planning everything." "It was never about the money," I explained, wanting her to understand. "It was about feeling valued as a person, not just as a provider." "I get that now," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "And I'm truly sorry, Marcus. Not just for this trip, but for years of taking you for granted. You've always been there for me, helping with college, supporting my art career, being my emergency contact for everything. and I've never properly acknowledged or reciprocated that support. Her genuine remorse touched me deeply. Thank you for saying that. Mom and Dad would like to see you too if you're willing. They're pretty embarrassed about how everything unfolded, but they really want to make things right. I considered this request carefully. I think I'd like that, but not quite yet. I'm finally enjoying Hawaii on my own terms and I need a little more time. I understand completely, she assured me. They'll be ready whenever you are. After breakfast, Brianna and I walked along the beach, our conversation shifting to my experiences since leaving the resort. I told her about the authentic local spots I'd discovered, the interesting people I'd met, and the surprising joy I'd found in unplanned adventures. You seem different, she observed as we paused to watch a group of sea turtles basking on the sand. More relaxed, happier. I feel different, I admitted. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making choices based solely on what I want, not what will please others or prove my worth. And that includes this Amelia person, she asked with a knowing smile. I felt my cheeks warm. We've been spending time together, yes. She's brilliant and passionate about marine conservation. Actually, she's giving a public talk at the Conservation Center this afternoon about coral reef protection. Would you like to come? I'd love to, Brianna said sincerely. And Marcus, I promise I'll actually listen and not try to make it about me this time. 2 days later, I agreed to meet my parents for dinner at a neutral location, a mid-range restaurant halfway between our respective accommodations. They arrived early and were waiting nervously when I walked in. Marcus' mom said, standing quickly. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but wasn't sure if it would be welcome. I made the decision for her, stepping forward to embrace both my parents briefly. You look good, son, Dad said as we sat down. Island life agrees with you. It does, I confirmed, though not in the way I originally expected. There was an awkward pause before Mom spoke again. We owe you an apology. Several, actually. We've been talking a lot these past few days, Dad continued, about patterns in our family that have been unfair to you. You've always been the responsible one, the one we could count on. Somewhere along the way, we started taking that for granted. We expected you to always understand, always accommodate, always support, without giving you the same consideration in return. Mom added, her voice thick with emotion. It wasn't right, and we're truly sorry. Their sincere apology meant more than I had expected. Thank you for acknowledging that. Brianna told us you've made some new friends here, Dad said clearly, trying to move the conversation to more comfortable territory. I have, I smiled, including a marine biologist named Amelia, who's been showing me parts of the island most tourists never see. She sounds lovely, Mom said warmly. We'd like to hear more about her and everything else you've been experiencing. To my surprise, my parents spent the rest of dinner genuinely listening as I shared stories about my adventures of the past week. They asked thoughtful questions and expressed real interest in my experiences, without once comparing them to Jake's supposed expertise or suggesting I should have done things differently. When the check came, Dad reached for it immediately. This one's on us, he said firmly. It's a tiny step toward recognizing everything you've contributed. As we parted that evening, Mom hugged me tightly. We'd love to spend some time with you before the trip ends if you're willing, but we'll understand if you need more space. Maybe a beach day tomorrow. I suggested, finding that I genuinely wanted to rebuild our connection now that the dynamics were shifting. Nothing elaborate, just relaxing together. The relief and joy on their faces told me this was the right decision. The final days of our Hawaiian vacation unfolded in ways I never could have planned, but were more meaningful than anything I had originally envisioned. I divided my time between solo adventures, outings with Amelia and her friends, and more balanced interactions with my family. Brianna and I went kayaking one morning and had the most honest conversation of our adult lives, acknowledging the competitive dynamics that had shaped our relationship and committing to a more supportive sibling bond moving forward. My parents joined Amelia and me for a traditional Hawaiian cooking class, where we laughed together as we failed spectacularly at folding taro leaves for laulau. On our last evening in Hawaii, I hosted a small dinner at my hotel's restaurant, inviting both my family and the new friends I'd made. Watching Amelia describe her coral restoration project to my fascinated parents, I felt a sense of alignment I'd never experienced before. My family relationships were finally shifting toward mutual respect rather than one-sided. Giving. Before we parted at the airport for our separate flights, my parents and Brianna back to Chicago, me to Seattle, Dad pulled me aside. This trip didn't go as planned, he acknowledged, but I think we all learned something more valuable than we would have from a perfect vacation. Your mother and I are committed to changing how we relate to you, son. It won't happen overnight, but we're working on it. That's all I can ask, I replied honestly. When I returned to Seattle, I brought back more than just a tan and souvenirs. I carried a new understanding of self-worth that transformed how I approached both work and personal relationships. I declined unnecessary overtime projects, started a weekly hiking group with Trevor and other friends, and maintained my newfound ability to enjoy unplanned experiences. Amelia and I continued our connection long distance with daily texts and weekly video calls. 2 months after returning home, I flew back to Hawaii for a long weekend to see her, and our relationship deepened further. We began discussing the possibility of me relocating to Hawaii, or her finding research opportunities in the Pacific Northwest. My relationship with my family also evolved. Sunday video calls became more reciprocal, with my parents showing genuine interest in my life, rather than just expecting updates on mine. When Brianna landed her first major graphic design contract, she insisted on flying to Seattle to celebrate with me, paying for her own ticket and treating me to dinner for a change. At Thanksgiving, when I returned to Chicago, the dynamic shift was noticeable to everyone, including extended family. My Aunt Elaine pulled me aside during dessert. Whatever happened in Hawaii changed things for the better, she observed. I haven't seen your parents this respectful of your boundaries, well, ever. It wasn't easy, I admitted. But sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most necessary changes. 6 months after the fateful Hawaiian vacation, Amelia visited Seattle for 2 weeks, staying in my apartment and exploring the possibility of transferring to a marine research center in the area. My family flew out for a weekend during her stay, eager to spend more time with the woman who had become so important to me. Watching my mother and Amelia discuss ocean conservation over dinner, my father genuinely engaged in the conversation rather than dominating it, and Brianna showing sincere interest in both our lives, I reflected on the painful but necessary journey that had brought us here. The $15,000 I spent on that Hawaiian vacation turned out to be the best investment I ever made, not because of the luxury experiences it purchased, but because it forced a reckoning that transformed our family dynamic. By walking away from people who didn't value me, I paradoxically created the space for genuine connection to grow. The most profound lesson I learned wasn't about family specifically, but about self-worth. Real love, whether from family, friends, or partners, doesn't need to be purchased with grand gestures or financial support. Real love is based on mutual respect, reciprocity, and valuing each other for who we are, not what we can provide. If you're struggling with similar dynamics in your relationships, remember that sometimes the kindest thing you can do, both for yourself and the people taking you for granted, is to step back and allow natural consequences to unfold. It's only when the imbalance is exposed that healing can truly begin. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you cared about to help them recognize your value? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for building healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by what you give, but by who you are.